Hello everyone, myself Professor Chavan. We have started the fourth chapter from our 11th Science CBSE board for our subject physics. In previous lecture we have learned about the vector addition and the subtraction when the only two vectors are given. Also in the previous lecture we have learned about the vector addition by the triangle law and the parallelogram law, and that law we can apply only when there are the two vectors are given. But what if the more than two vectors are available? Then how to perform the vector addition? How we can go for the vector addition? And for that purpose we have the another law, and that is the law of polygon. Okay, so vector law of the polygon. Vector addition, law of polygon. Okay. The vector addition of law of polygon states that when the two or more than the two vectors are given, then the resultant of these all the vectors will be given by joining the initial position with the final position of that all the vectors. Okay, the initial position of the first vector will join the final position of the last vector, and that line will give us the position. That line will give us the direction and the magnitude of the remaining all the vectors. Okay, so in that case, if we go for the addition of the all the vectors, then in that case the vector joined by the initial position of the first vector with the final position of the last vector, it will give us the value of the resultant. Okay, suppose we have the vectors like this vector A, okay, then we have this vector B, okay, we have this vector C, okay, we have this vector D, okay, then we have the vector E. Okay, we have this vector E. Then how to go for the addition of these all the vectors? Then what we have to do? We have to connect these all the vectors in a sequence. Okay, one by one sequence we have to connect these all the vectors, and finally we have to attach the final position with respect to the initial position, and the arrow of the resultant will be connecting to the arrow of the last vector. So we have to connect these all the vectors by the sequence. Okay, so this is the vector A, this is the vector B, okay, this is the vector C, this is the vector D, and this is the vector E. Okay, now to find the resultant of these all the vectors, what we have to do? We have to connect the initial position of the first vector with the final position of the last vector. So where is the initial position of the first vector? At this point. Okay, and where is the final position of the last vector? At this arrow end. Okay, so when we connect this, what will happen there? It will give us the resultant R. Okay, it will give us the resultant R. So we can say that R is equal to vector R is equal to vector A plus vector B plus vector C plus vector D plus vector E. Okay, so in this case more than two vectors are given, and we have to go by the law of polygon, that is the addition of the vectors is given by joining the initial position with the final position. Okay, the addition of the vector is given by the joining the initial position with respect to the final position. Okay, so if we have the vectors, we can go by the Polygon law. Okay, but if the vectors are joined together and they are forming one closed polygon, okay, if they are forming one closed polygon, suppose we have the vectors A, vector B, vector C, vector D, vector E, and the vector F. Okay, we have the vector F. Then what will happen there? The same sequence we have to go, that we have to connect the A with B, with C, with D, with E, with F. Okay, then in that case what will happen? The vectors will be get, okay, this is the arrow of this F. Okay, so if we connect this all the vectors, what will happen there? That this is the A, this is B, this is C, this is D, this is E. Okay, then in that case we have to show the last vector here, vector F. Okay, this is the vector F. Then in that case, what is necessary? That when the vectors combiningly together forms one closed polygon, then in that case the resultant will be equal to 0. Okay, the resultant will be equal to 0. Okay, so write down this, that if the vectors form closed polygon, then R equal to 0. Okay, then resultant R equal to 0, because if we add all these vectors, we will get the value R is equal to 0. Okay, this value becomes 0. But also, if we have all these vectors and if we change the direction of the any one vector, then that vector will give us the value of the resultant. Okay, that vector will give us the value of resultant. Okay, so if we have this closed polygon, and in that if we change the direction of the any one vector, okay, if we change the direction of the any one vector, suppose we change the direction of this vector A. Okay, if we change the direction of this vector A, then look at this diagram carefully, what you will get. What is happening there? That according to the law of polygon, if we change the direction of the any one vector, that vector will give us the value of the addition of all the vectors. That vector will give us the value of the resultant, its magnitude and its direction, because that vector is nothing but joining the initial position of the one vector with the final position of the last vector. Okay, this is the initial position of the vector B and this is the final position of the vector F. We are joining these two, and also the arrow is in the direction of the last position. So that's why, what is our law? Joining the initial position with the final position. This is the initial position and this is the final position, and this vector A will give us the value of the resultant. Okay, this vector A will give us the value of resultants. So when we change the direction, when the direction of any one vector in closed polygon it change, that vector gives value of resultant. Okay, that vector will give us the value of resultant, and here what is the resultant? That A, here A is equal to B plus A is equal to B plus C plus D plus E plus F. Okay, it is not equal to 0. Okay, not equal to 0, because this vector will give us the value of the resultant. The direction of one vector is opposite there. So that's why when the direction of any one vector is in closed polygon it changed, that vector gives us the value of the resultant. Okay, so what is the law of polygon, or when we can apply the law of polygon? That when the two or more than two vectors are given, and in that when the initial position is connecting the final position, then that vector will give us the value of the resultant. In that also the two cases are there. If the vectors to be added forms one closed polygon, then in that case the value of the resultant is 0. And if in a closed polygon, if we change the direction of the any one vector, then that vector will give us the value of the resultant there. Okay, so this is the third law for the vector addition.